Hope you had a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Not everybody in America did over the past 7 days. Well, actually, just over the weekend, 10 children accidentally killed with firearms. Over the week, the ages of the kids accidentally killed with firearms: 3, 6, 6, 7, 9, 11, 11, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, and 2 of unspecified ages. Yet another Kentucky preschool-age boy was shot and killed by his sister. Gunfail 25. David Waldman's keeping track of this week by week. We're up to week 25 now over at Daily Kos. With Independence Day behind us, he says serious casualties were mercifully low, although someone in Central Virginia will have to ponder whether his or her July 4th celebration of freedom was really and truly worth taking the life of a 7-year-old boy who died of a head wound. 10 families were sitting in their homes minding their own business when someone else's exercise of their Second Amendment rights apparently overrode their property rights. And he goes through a long list of people who got shot in their own homes because somebody nearby was out playing with their guns. Very interesting stuff going on here in America right now. We will, by the way, we're going to get to the Trayvon Martin trial, where James Bamford is going to be on. We're going to be talking about the NSA and why Edward Snowden had to flee the U.S. It's anything goes summer, so whatever is on your mind. Plus, we've got more of the news of the day that I want to get into. But first, Neil McCabe is with us. He's a conservative commentator, editor of the Guns and Patriots newsletter. Neil W. McCabe, MCCABE.com is his website. Neil, welcome back to the program.
Hey, good to be with you, Tom.
You know, Neil, the old joke used to be that your right to swing your arm ends at the tip of my nose. This gun situation seems like it's a little out of control. And B, now we've got Kansas, where the Kansas legislature said, okay, cool, let's have teachers carry guns. And the insurance company said, okay, fine, you're going to do it without our insurance. I suppose you could claim that as a victory for the free market?
Well, I mean, a little bit. I mean, there's going to be some touch and go as we continue to restore Americans' gun rights. But guns themselves are insurance. And certainly, we don't decide whether or not we're going to follow the Constitution based on a private insurance company.
We're restoring gun rights? When were gun rights taken away? Are you talking about gun confiscation laws back in the early part of the 19th century? I mean, the late 1700s, early 1800s, there were literally hundreds of towns around America where when you came into town, you had to leave your gun with a sheriff.
I don't think we have the gun rights.
That was the norm in the Old West, in fact.
Well, I think we need to expand gun rights, and certainly we see what with Governor Quinn's sort of quasi veto in Illinois. You know, there's millions of Americans in Illinois who don't have nearly the gun rights that were anticipated when the framers wrote the Second Amendment.
Well, why don't we just go back to the way that it was in so many it wasn't so much in the South. I'll give you that, because they had the slave patrols and they were all quite well armed. But in the North and in the West, as the West was being expanded during the time of the writing of the Constitution and in the decades following it, most towns in America, or many towns in America, required you to turn your gun in to the sheriff's office. You pick it up when you leave. When you come into town, there were no gun zones. That is the history of our country, as you well know, Neil. Shouldn't we go back to that?
Well, I think that's also a time when every household was required to, or at least the males within a certain military age, were required to actually have working weapons, and they were drilling
Neil,
on the town square. So
respectfully, Neil, A, that was only in the South with regard to the slave patrols, and B, only at the turn of the 19th century, in 1800, the year Thomas Jefferson was elected. Best estimates are, and there's some pretty reasonable math done by people on your side, that between 16 and 19% of American families owned a gun. The fact of the matter is they were incredibly expensive things to own, and they required an enormous amount of maintenance because they rusted easily. So most people didn't own a gun.
But you could have one. And then, of course, when they invented the lathe, which allowed the price of gun stocks to drop, then it was a
stainless steel.
A document, a democratization of gun ownership. But I mean, what we're seeing in what you were talking about with Kansas is if there's a private insurance company, the private insurance market is failing. Are you suggesting that the government should step in and fill in the gap where the private insurance market fails?
No, what I'm suggesting is that the private insurance market is validating the wisdom of governments that said on our government property paid for by our taxpayers, where we're teaching our children, we collectively, we the people, as in the constitutional sense, are going to say, no thanks, this is a gun-free zone. And when the good Republicans of Kansas said, oh, no, we're not going to do that, we're going to start putting guns on the hips of teachers where kids can just grab them and point them at people, the insurance companies said, what, are you crazy?
Well, I think that, we saw, what happened with Newtown, and that if there was an armed American at Newtown, conceivably that tragedy could have been ended.
There were 2 armed Americans when Gabby Giffords was shot. It didn't stop any, but in fact, the guy the woman who took down the shooter, it was, a middle-aged mom. She did not have a weapon. Anybody who starts firing into a crowd of children, Neil, is crazy.
I mean, it's, many Americans would prefer to have the chance that a gun would give you against a spree shooter.
I don't think so. If you look at what happened,
hide under our desk, we would just hide behind a tree.
If you go back, no, Neil, go back to the shootings in America where there were armed people around. What did they do? They ran in the other direction with their guns.
Well, I mean, we were talking about the West. What really disarmed the West was the fact they showed that as soon as the population of a town reached 25 to 30% females, that's when the gunfighting stopped, because the women just put an end to it.
So
maybe that's your answer.
You have stats to back that up?
Not in front of me, but
I'm guessing that the only towns that were more than 50% male were the boom town, the mining towns, the gold rush towns, the early ones.
Sure. You're on the outskirts, but as the females went west and people started having families, I mean, that's when the gunfighting stopped. Yeah.
Okay, may well be. All that argues for is the need for more women in politics, doesn't it? Doesn't that kind of point out that the most dangerous drug in the world is testosterone?
Well, I think young unmarried men are the most destabilizing sector of any society. And that's why they created the Inquisition, not the Inquisition, rather the Crusades, just to sort of, the Europeans just said, why don't you somewhere else and have mayhem?
But can't we just agree, Neil, that pre-adolescent kids and guns should not be in the same room?
Say again? I'm sorry, I'm on a train.
I'm sorry. Can't we just agree that pre-adolescent kids and guns should not be in the same room, even if the gun is carried by a teacher?
First of all, there's nothing about being a teacher that means that you don't know how to handle a gun or that a gun is going to be unsafe. And the idea of a child running up and grabbing a gun, I'm not sure at what grade that's going to be or how it can be set up. But there are many parents after Newtown who had the opportunity to sort of look at that situation and say, wow, if there was someone there armed, this thing could have been stopped. I mean, we know.
I don't think so. I think that's an NRA wet dream, but I don't think so. I think it's just a fantasy. But Neil will have to leave it at that. You believe it, I don't. We'll agree to disagree. It's always good talking with you. Neil McCabe, neilwmccabe.com, the website. Thank you, Neil. Good talking with you today. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It seems like it's time to do something about this, and putting guns in the hands of teachers, not the brightest thing.